At the will reading, Grandpa's lawyer handed me a check for $29 million. My parents grabbed it, tore it up, and set it on fire, yelling, "This is what you get for cutting us off." I didn't stop them, I just smiled. The truth is, what they destroyed wasn't what they thought. Hi, Reddit. My grandpa was the only one in my family who ever made me feel like I mattered. I'm 24 now, but growing up, I was always treated like the unwanted child. My older brother Kyle was the star, perfect grades, football captain, mom's favorite, dad's pride. And me? I was the kid they blamed for ruining mom's body during birth. I never got the nice clothes, the attention, or even a fair chance. When I got into fights at school because people mocked me, my parents blamed me. When I cried, they rolled their eyes. When I achieved something, they compared it to Kyle. But Grandpa saw me. Every summer, he'd take me away to his lakeside cabin while Kyle went to fancy tennis camps. He taught me how to fish, how to play chess, how to fix things around the house. When I got a full ride to university, Grandpa clapped the loudest. My parents didn't even show up to the graduation ceremony. And when I made the decision 2 years ago to cut off contact with my parents after a particularly cruel Thanksgiving dinner, Grandpa pulled me aside and said quietly, "I support you. Do what gives you peace." I never realized how much those words meant until he passed. The call came on a Monday morning. I was at work, sorting through endless spreadsheets when my phone buzzed and I saw my uncle's number. My heart sank. I knew what it was before I even picked up. Grandpa had died in his sleep. He was 91. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, the world spinning around me while people carried on with their coffee runs and project meetings. I walked out and sat in my car for what felt like hours. A week later, I received an official letter inviting me to the will reading. The thing is, Grandpa was wealthy, not just comfortably retired, I mean old money rich, real estate, stocks, antique cars, a collection of gold and silver coins locked away in a private vault. And ever since I was a child, I always assumed my parents and Kyle would inherit everything. That's how my family worked, entitlement over effort, bloodline over connection. But I guess Grandpa had other plans. The will reading was held at his estate, in his leather and mahogany-lined study, the kind of room that smells like aged wisdom and quiet power. The lawyer, Mr. Levington, sat behind Grandpa's desk, wearing a somber tie and a knowing expression. My parents were there along with Kyle, two of Grandpa's old colleagues, and me, the black sheep of the family, seated at the far end like a forgotten seat filler. Mr. Levington began reading through the will. It started predictably: donations to Grandpa's favorite charities, a few bequests to old friends, a classic car to Kyle, and then he got to me, to his granddaughter who stood by him when others turned away. I leave a personal check in the amount of $29 million. The room went still. My mother's jaw unhinged like she'd seen a ghost. My father turned a shade of red I'd never witnessed. Kyle muttered something under his breath. I sat frozen. Then the lawyer opened a folder and handed me an envelope. Inside was a single check, dated, signed, real. I didn't even know how to react. I stared at it, my hands trembling. 29 million. It didn't even seem real. But then it all turned to chaos. My mother lunged across the table before anyone could react and snatched the check out of my hands. "You selfish brat," she spat, shaking the paper in front of my face. "This should have been ours." Dad joined in, yelling about how I manipulated Grandpa, how I was ungrateful, how I turned the family against each other. Kyle just stood there watching, arms folded, saying nothing. They didn't stop at yelling. My father pulled out a lighter, yes, an actual lighter, and before I could even think to respond, he set the check on fire. Flames licked up the edges of the paper. My mom screamed something about payback. The air filled with a sharp scent of burning ink. "This is what you get for cutting us off," my mother roared. I didn't stop them. I didn't scream or cry or beg. I just smiled. They didn't know what they had done, because what they destroyed, that flaming piece of paper, wasn't the money itself. It was a symbolic gesture. The real inheritance, the actual funds, were already secured in a trust. Grandpa had set everything in motion months ago. The check was a decoy, a final test of character, and they failed miserably. I didn't tell them that, of course, not yet. Let them think they'd ruined me. Let them carry that smug sense of justice for a little while longer. The lawyer said nothing. He looked at me, and in that moment, I could see it in his eyes. He knew they'd exposed themselves exactly the way Grandpa expected. I got up without a word, nodded politely to Mr. Levington, and walked out of that house. My parents shouted behind me, demanding answers, demanding apologies. demanding what they believed was theirs, but I didn't look back. The estate transfer completed 2 weeks later. I now own multiple properties, including Grandpa's beloved lakeside cabin, several rental units across the city, and a secure vault that holds more than just coins. It holds decades of carefully built wealth, trusts, bonds, holdings, and, yes, a very real $29 million, safely out of reach of anyone else. The check was just a ceremonial slip, a spark designed to expose the fire within them, and it worked. But I wasn't done. They think I walked away with nothing, they think they won, they think they taught me a lesson, they have no idea what's coming next. They thought they burned my future. Instead, they lit the match that burned theirs. For 2 weeks, I said nothing, no social media posts, no retaliation, no contact. I just went about my life, quietly moving into a luxury condo in the city, thanks to the trust fund Grandpa had set up under a separate name years ago. It was untraceable to anyone, not explicitly named in his private instructions. I wasn't interested in just walking away, not this time. They didn't just burn a piece of paper, they showed the world exactly who they were, and I intended to make sure they lived with the consequences of that. I started small. First, I called the private investigator Grandpa had once recommended to me, a man named Harris who had helped him untangle a financial issue years ago. I asked him to dig into my parents' finances. It didn't take long for things to unravel. Turns out my parents weren't nearly as well off as they pretended to be. They'd borrowed against their house twice, maxed out credit cards, and taken out personal loans in Kyle's name, loans that were quickly falling into delinquency. All that high-end lifestyle they flaunted to their neighbors was funded by smoke and debt. Second, I contacted the family attorney again, Mr. Levington, and asked him about the stipulation Grandpa had included in his will. There was a clause Grandpa insisted on adding: anyone who contests the will forfeits their inheritance, no exceptions. I asked if what my parents did, destroying the symbolic check in front of the executor, could count as a challenge. His response was simple: absolutely. He filed the necessary paperwork. Within days, their minor share of Grandpa's assets, the few things he left them out of sentimentality, like a vacation timeshare and an old investment account, were legally revoked. That was hit number 1. But I wasn't done. I knew my parents relied on reputation. They were the kind of people who lived for appearances, Christmas cards with fake smiles, dinner parties with their elite friends, bragging about Kyle's latest internship, but that world was fragile. I submitted anonymous tips to a few organizations my parents were involved with, including the local church board and a homeowners association, attaching footage from the security camera Mr. Levington had at the will reading. The video showed my parents screaming, grabbing the check, and literally setting fire to it in a fit of rage. I didn't even need to write anything, the footage spoke volumes. By the end of the week, they were politely asked to step down from 2 committees. That was hit number 2. Then came Kyle. I hadn't spoken to my brother in over a year. He'd always taken my parents' side, always looked down at me like I was the weird charity case who got too emotional, but I figured I owed him a chance, not for him, but for me. I invited him to meet me for coffee. He looked tired, worn down, not the same golden boy he once was. Turns out his dream job hadn't panned out, and he'd been let go during downsizing. He was back living with our parents, waiting for another opportunity that never came. I told him the truth about the inheritance. I told him they had burned a decoy, that Grandpa had planned everything. He didn't believe me at first, but then I pulled out the real document, the original trust paperwork with Grandpa's signature and Mr. Levington's seal. Kyle stared at it like he was looking at an alien language, and then he laughed, a bitter, empty laugh. They ruined everything, he muttered. They said you manipulated him, that you were selfish. I nodded. They always needed someone to blame. Kyle looked up at me, something in his eyes I hadn't seen since we were kids: regret, maybe, or shame. I'm not asking for a dime, he said quietly, but if there's anything I can do to make it right, just say so. I told him the only thing I wanted was for him to stop being their mouthpiece, to see things clearly, maybe even get out before they dragged him under with them. We didn't hug. It wasn't some magical reunion, but he walked away quieter than he arrived, and for once, I think he saw me. By the time word started spreading around the community that I had inherited the bulk of Grandpa's estate, my parents were in full panic mode. They called again and again and again, voicemails full of venom. This money was never meant for you. You brainwashed him. You turned him against us. You owe us. I didn't respond, not when they texted, not when they emailed. Not even when my mom sent a tearful voice memo saying they were on the verge of losing the house. Actions have consequences. They wanted to burn something, let them watch it all go up in flames, their fake pride, their borrowed wealth, their illusion of control. In the months that followed, I used part of the inheritance to support a local literacy nonprofit that Grandpa cared about. I also fixed up his old lakeside cabin, moved in, and adopted a goofy golden retriever named Hank. Now, some evenings, I sit on the porch swing with a glass of wine and watch the sunset over the water. I imagine Grandpa sitting next to me. I think he'd be proud. He didn't leave me the money to spoil me, he left it because he believed in me. He knew I'd use it to build a better life and to break away from the people who tried to tear mine down. My parents still go around telling people I stole the money, tricked Grandpa, and cheated the system. But they don't have any control anymore, not over me, not over Kyle, and not over the real legacy Grandpa left behind, one of love, strength, and fairness. So let them stay angry, let them burn with hate. All they destroyed was a check, but by doing that, they showed who they really are.